Hey there, it's James, and welcome back to another side quest, where either myself or Jesse does a quick, spoiler-free review of one of our solo books. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that we have a $1 Patreon if you want to support our show. This also grants access to all episodes 2 days earlier than public release. Links for Patreon, email, and all social media are in the show notes. We post our episode release schedule at the top of our Facebook page in case you're looking to read along with us. Please feel free to send us an email with questions, comments, book recommendations, and more. This is going to be a different kind of side quest. I will be doing a side quest mini-series in which I plan on reviewing books by one of my all-time favorite authors, the fan favorite and massively popular Brandon Sanderson. This mini-series will only focus on his books in the Cosmere. Bear with me. I started reading both Cosmere and non-Cosmere Sanderson novels years ago, ever since a friend introduced me to him via an early trilogy of his called Mistborn. He started writing adult fantasy, but has since written for all different ages and genres. Recently, he announced a surprise Kickstarter that is now the most funded Kickstarter in history. He basically wrote 4 secret books during COVID. This is a big deal because anyone who follows Brandon knows that he publicly announces anything and everything he does on a weekly basis. You can go to his website and see status bars for every project he's working on. You can watch his weekly YouTube updates. You can listen to his weekly podcast called Intentionally Blank. So imagine his fans' surprise when he released a hilarious video where he wrote 4 complete novels in secret and told no one but his wife. They were so secret that he didn't even tell his own publishing team. He left all 4 manuscripts on a desk at work one day and walked away. His team came in later and were blown away and surprised and very confused. It's a really funny story. People who have never heard of him or never read any of his novels are now jumping in on the fun and getting excited. I myself haven't read him in quite a while, and in recent weeks I've had the itch to go back and start at the beginning and read his novels all over again, and even some that I haven't read yet. I thought it would be fun to do a mini-series in which I spend each episode doing a quick, spoiler-free review of them. Now, even though he has a lot of novels, we are going to stick with his adult fantasy works. Most of his adult fantasy novels takes place in what is called the Cosmere, an interconnected universe. Now, don't tune out yet. Don't let that scare you off. Don't think this is the Marvel Cinematic Universe where everything is basically required to watch in order to fully understand. There is a golden rule that you need to remember before we go any further. Keep this in the back of your head and you'll be just fine. You can read any single book series in the Cosmere without having to read any other book series in the Cosmere. You will get a full story from start to finish and never have to touch anything else he's published. Here's how it works. Each book series takes place on its own planet, but each planet exists in the same galaxy or universe. Sanderson is known for his world building, crazy endings, and very specifically his magic systems. He always has extremely intricate and well thought out systems with very defined and specific rules. Since each book in the Cosmere takes place on its own planet, that means each planet has its own unique magic system. So depending on which series you choose or what sounds the most interesting to you, you will get an entirely different and defined world. So possibly one of your immediate questions may be, if all these planets are in the same universe, then why would magic be different from one planet to another? Universal rules and laws can't just change simply because you leave one planet and go to another. And that's where we get to the behind the scenes of the Cosmere. There is an ongoing background story behind every novel. I hesitate to get too specific in case our reader wants to find out on their own, but there is a big picture story taking place that affects how and why each planet works the way it does. I will explain it more at the end of this episode and give a fair spoiler warning where you can jump out. So, each series will give you a glimpse into that background, some more than others. As my reviews come out, my goal is to avoid talking too much about those larger Cosmere spoilers, and will instead focus mainly on the story being told in the current series, when possible. As it stands, this is what currently exists in the Cosmere. Elantris, a standalone novel. Warbreaker, a standalone novel. Mistborn, a series. The Stormlight Archives, a series. White Sands, a graphic novel. Arcanum Unbound, a collection of short stories and novellas. And lastly, some of his secret novels coming out next year are Cosmere related, but I'm not going to name them here as many people are trying to avoid the details until their actual release. Since there is no need to read everything to understand everything, thanks to our golden rule, there is also no technically correct reading order of the Cosmere either. For example, the Mistborn series spans hundreds of years. The Stormlight archives will jump over a decade. There's just no way to properly interweave books to make some clear or perfect timeline. Although, I think some people have actually done that, go figure, the internet. Having said that, there are smaller things that you may catch if you read one book before another, or maybe not catch if you read something else first. So if you choose to read all of the Cosmere books, depending on where you start, you may find Easter eggs or even reverse Easter eggs. This is okay, it's a lot of fun to discover this way. If you'd like my personal suggestion, and you don't mind reading a trilogy as your initial entry, I would suggest Mistborn. It's not his first work, but it is one of his most popular, and it gives you a great feel for everything Sanderson does. I would then follow that up with Elantris. Not because Elantris is bad or anything, it just so happens to be his very first published work ever, so while it's still amazing, it is not peak modern day Sanderson, although I should mention I will be reviewing Elantris and Warbreaker first. These books are long. Some of them look like massive ancient tomes, although that's most of the Stormlight archives, so maybe best not to start there. I will likely be reviewing that last. I actually haven't read that one yet. In general, while Brandon Sanderson writes books for all ages, and I would suggest reading anything by him, he really shines in his adult-oriented novels, and especially the Cosmere. This is where he started, and this is where, in my opinion, he is at his best. At this point, this is the end of my spoiler-free explanation. I have nothing more that I want to go over. So I will briefly now go into spoiler territory and explain the Cosmere in slightly more detail. If you are dropping off here, thank you for listening. Check out YouTube and Patreon, social media, and we will see you next time. Okay, for those of you sticking around, here is your brief Cosmere spoiler. Things in the Cosmere can exist in one of three realms: the cognitive realm, the spiritual realm, or the physical realm. In addition, everything in the Cosmere revolves around what was called ad nauseam. Little is known about it now, but it was some sort of god or force, if you will. It's supposedly what brought the Cosmere into existence, and long, long ago, the Shattering took place. Upon ad nauseam's defeat, it broke apart into 16 shards, each of which represents something specific, such as ambition, dominion, ruin, devotion, and more. These shards would eventually settle on planets and use its power to reshape its world, such as creating unique magic systems. Depending on each shard's intent, the magic system it creates will base itself around that idea. Some shards may even exist in a different realm from the others, one of those three realms we just talked about, which also plays a role into how a planet's magic system develops or how its power is accessed by its wielders. Now, I've skipped over a ton of detail since ad nauseam and these shards have a lot of history behind them, but this should give you a decent enough explanation as to how and why things can be different from planet to planet, and hopefully provide an intriguing window into Sanderson's novels. That is officially all I have for you now, but look out for my first spoiler-free Cosmere review of Elantris in the near future. Until next time, bye.